Hello and welcome to my channel. If you like my content, please like and subscribe. Helps out the channel a lot. Hope you enjoy the stories. A lot of these Home Alone stories seem to be mostly younger people telling the story, but this actually happened only 3 years ago when I was 28. My wife was out of town with her parents for her uncle who had passed away, and unfortunately I couldn't come. Bills were tight and I was the breadwinner. Basically, I couldn't afford to take time off work. I suppose I wasn't completely alone. We do have our dog Elsa, who is a 9-year-old golden retriever, and our baby boy Dylan, who's less than a year old at the time. Other than that, I was alone. I put Dylan down for bed around 9 p.m. and hoped he'd sleep for as long as possible. I lay down shortly after with Elsa. She sleeps with my wife and I every night. I was watching an old rerun of that old show Fear Factor with Joe Rogan. I couldn't sleep for whatever reason, but it was a common occurrence. Call it whatever you want, but whenever my wife is away for the night, which isn't often, sometimes I have trouble sleeping. I like to know that she is safe. I'm an overthinker sometimes, but it is what it is. I took some melatonin and I was out like a light. Next thing you know, I wake up in full alert mode. Elsa is barking and the fire alarm is going off and Dylan is crying. How could there be a fire? There has got to be a mistake. Elsa and I ran over to Dylan's room, which is thankfully only the next room down. I picked my little buddy up and went to investigate. There was an insane amount of smoke coming from the kitchen. When I walked out there was a full raging fire that I had no time to stop. I ran outside with my babies and called the police, and they luckily arrived very quickly, but it was too late. At the same time, they were able to get the fire under control, of course, but not before just about everything was toast. I remember breaking down crying, wondering what was going on and what had caused this. Luckily, we managed to get out in time. Truthfully, you wouldn't believe just how quick that fire spread. They eventually got to where the fire had started, and I couldn't believe it. They came to the conclusion that it was set on purpose by someone. There were signs of forced entry at the garage door, and that's where the intruders started the fire. Whoever it was poured gasoline all over the garage and dumped it all over the house, causing it to spread like wildfire. I'll never be more thankful that we got out of that house alive, but it was truly the most traumatic thing I have ever been through in my life. Elsa, Dylan and I stayed at my parents' house for the night, along with my wife as well. She rushed back to town when I called her to let her know about everything that happened. The thing that still gets to me to this day is whoever started the fire was never caught, and probably never will be. My wife and I are completely stumped and have no clue who would want to do something like this. The fact that we will never know is the most terrifying part of this. On a cold and snowy night in 2016, I lived on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado, and I'm sure you know the winters here can be quite harsh. I remember sitting on the couch and turning on the movie. I can also remember feeling rather uncomfortable after a while, like I had been watched almost. It didn't feel like I was alone. I was always told that these feelings were just anxiety and that they weren't real, so I really just had to suppress them and get over it. What else could I do anyways, realistically? I was home alone for the night, and that was the bottom line. Eventually, I would forget about my feelings of dread and anxiety, and it would all be fine. I was sitting there, zoned out into the movie I was watching, when I got a sudden feeling of adrenaline rush through my body. I had the urge to make sure the doors were locked, and for some reason, of course, we had the front door and back door, and both of the garage doors were all locked, but still something felt wrong. I remember sighing as I was really just sick of the uncertainty and anxiety I had been feeling for seemingly no reason other than to make myself worry. I was sick of it, so even though I wasn't tired, I decided it was time to go to bed. Hopefully I could fall asleep. I woke up randomly after sleeping for a few hours and I had to go to the restroom, so that's what I did real quick. I walked out of my room and down the hall a few doors and I did my business. I came to the disturbing realisation that I could hear someone talking outside. No clue what they were saying, but it sounded like a grown man. Instantly I was in fight or flight mode. I ran out of the bathroom, slipped my snow boots on and grabbed my phone and coat. I ran to the living room while calling my mum, and that's when I realised the front door was wide open. I knew I locked it earlier, so I was absolutely stunned by this. I shut the door and I locked it once again. While looking out the window, my mum picked up the phone, sounding a little bit annoyed as it was probably 12 AM where she was, half asleep. I told her someone broke into the house. This time my parents had to believe me. Or they would at least have to act like they believed me, with a claim as bold. She told me to stay on the phone with her while my father called the police. That was when I saw footprints all across our front yard, starting and ending in multiple different positions. Likewise in the backyard, like whoever it was been watching me all night. To this day, I actually think my own parents don't believe me about this, because when the police showed up there was no signs of forced entry. Somehow they picked it locked easily. Whoever it was knew what they were doing. They didn't find anyone in the house, and they didn't steal anything, nor did they attack me. And we don't have security cameras, so the police left and my parents came back early that night. They weren't happy with me, and even though they would never admit it, I'm almost positive they think I was lying about what really happened. Did they really think I walked out in the snow for 10 minutes making all those footsteps, and that I lied about it, to make it more believable that someone really broke in? I lived in Sydney, Australia. This happened when I was 15 at home alone. It was about 9 PM and I was just coming out of the bathroom when I heard my front gate swing open and my dog begin barking across the hall. I saw someone run past the porch window into the backyard. I was able to vaguely make out what he looked like. He was hunched over and had a sickly pale skin and was wearing all black with long messy hair, partly covering his face. I went into the living room to see what was going on. My dog was still at the front door growling. Since I hadn't seen the guy return, this meant he was still somewhere in my backyard. I waited at the door for a while when another, more normal looking man walked down to the porch and came right up to the security bars. I don't remember all the details, but our conversation went something along the lines of him saying that, "Have you seen my friend?" And I replied, "Yeah, I think he's in my backyard." He replied saying, "Okay, because I've been following this random guy all over the place. I think he's on drugs and might be a bit dangerous." This struck me as weird though. What did he mean by this random guy when he had just called him his friend? He quickly walked away, going off into the darkness towards my yard. I should also mention that there's a door around back, but that also has security bars in front of it, and the door was locked at the time. I waited at the front door for a bit, then sat back down. About 2 minutes of waiting, the guy I spoke with walked back onto the porch and looked in through the security bars. He now had his pale, potentially drugged out guy with him, who was also pacing back and forth. I went to the door to see what he wanted. He said, "Hey man, sorry, I just found him." He said, "Hey look, he's really nervous and he'd like if you unlocked the door and came out, just so he could see that you're harmless." I felt the pain in my chest. The creepy drugged out guy had stopped pacing now and was standing unnaturally still, staring me dead in the eyes. There was an uncomfortable silence. I didn't say anything but stepped forward to push the French door shut, causing the second guy to lunge at me and shove his hand through the bars towards me. I jumped back and slammed the door shut with my foot bolting it. I called my parents and they called the police. the two men had gone. When the police arrived, they told me about a break-in that had just occurred down the street less than an hour ago. As far as I know, they never found the two guys. Looking back, it was likely that the first guy ran into the backyard to try to find a way in, and the second guy went to help him, which is why they were back there for so long. What really disturbs me is the fact that they didn't just want to break in, nor the fact that I was home alone deterred them. They wanted me to come outside to them, or to get into where I was. I can't sleep for some time after this.